thoughtful ideas, suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and all the factors are useful.
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To perhaps those joining us for the first time here for ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. and Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, let me thank you very much for your calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, where after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show, proudly now in its 27th season. Also, let me thank you for, as we go forward, ideas and topics and guests and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. We have a great show planned for you this day and timely, right before this election that is coming. But before I get into that and to frame and give a context to my conversation with my great guest today, I want to take and stop and pause and take a moment of silence, please, in the memory of Sergeant Harold Preston, the wonderful HPD officer who we just buried and memorialized in his homegoing service just the other day. 41 years on the police department force, about 2 weeks away from retirement. So let us all just pause and take a moment of silence in Sergeant Preston's honor. Okay, we live in interesting times. The juxtaposition, I might just add this little juxtaposition because I think it's interesting. In a post-George Floyd reality, which is what we're going to be talking about, and now in a post-Sergeant Harold Preston reality, both are graduates of Jack Gates High School. I think God always has a sense of humor, and this is kind of a reminder of that. And so one is the policing and one is the civilian, and we won't go into that because we just did a show on that previously. And we'll do more on that going forward. But today I want to talk about the reality of this election coming up, and not about the candidates, not about party, not about the persons involved. It's much bigger than that. It's about democracy and what does citizenship mean in a democracy. And I wanted to do it in a way that allows us to understand that even after November 3rd, the period from November 4th to January 21st, when the swearing in of the next president happens, those 78 days are going to be probably the most interesting days that this country has ever seen, without a doubt, regardless of who wins the election. So before we even get to the election, though, we know we're living in interesting times where stress and tension, anxiety, fear, and anger are running rampant. And people are trying to deal with all their emotions and deal with COVID-19 on top of that. And so how do we make sense? How do we cope? How do we have coping skills and mechanisms for pre-election and God only knows for post-election? So I reached out to someone who I thought could help us do that because I needed a psychologist. And I needed someone who also is involved with young and the young center and understands that philosophy of mind. And so we have as our guest this week, Dr. Herb Agan, who's professor at U of H of psychology and in family practice. And has been on before, been a little while on Dialogue Houston, but brings an interesting perspective on the issues that we're talking about today. So let me just stop and welcome Dr. Agan. Welcome, Herb.
Great, thank you, Larry. It's good to be back with you. You're right, it has been a while.
It has been a while, but so
and I might add that we ran into each other at the donut shop not long ago. I said, yes, I didn't know you ate here.
That was my one guilty pleasure treat, sneak away that I allowed myself. Actually, I was driven there that morning because I'm not allowed yet to go out.
Right.
So, and that was good. That was
it is. I get the breakfast tacos and a few donut holes because they don't have any calories or sugar.
I guess I was supposed to run into you.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me read this little statement to get us started.
Okay.
The world of unlogic. We're living in a world of unlogic. Unlogic is not ignorance or stupidity. It is reason distorted by suspicion and misinformation. A state of mind that arranges itself around fictions rather than established facts. It seems that's where we have been for most of 2020. And so in that world that we live in, coupled with the post-George Floyd reality, how do you make sense of all of this that's going on, Dr. Herb? And what do we do?
Yeah, interesting. I was in the midst of teaching a class at the Young Center called Never Waste a Good Crisis last spring when the COVID crisis hit. And of course, I had to go to Zoom there, and then I had to go to Zoom classes at the University of Houston. I'm currently teaching 9 Zoom classes a week of the 5 classes that I teach. And the interesting thing about a crisis, let me talk about that. Problems are one thing. Problems you sort of expect, and you find solutions. You have people that can help you. You can go on programs like this, or, you know, there's always people that help you deal with your problems, even the person next door down the street. But a crisis is something that comes unbidden, and it comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't make any logical sense. That's part of what makes it a crisis, is we can't make sense of it. And then when we have a lot of people in the country who don't honor the Enlightenment, where we move towards science and reason to negotiate our problems, find solutions, respect one another. Yes, we can agree to disagree, but we have to work together to find a way. We moved out of that, it seems, in the present climate in our country. And that throws a lot of people off, because how do you deal logically with someone who's illogical or non-logical? You see it in a marriage relationship. If somebody's just so mad they can't think, it's not a good time to process and work through stuff. The emotions have to come down a little bit so you can talk, because we at the Young Center, we operate out of our complexes. And our complexes are unamended ideas, thoughts, feelings, experiences, concepts, constructs that haven't got amended. And I often say that sometimes, you know, we could act like a 3rd grader when we're living in an 11th grade world. But the call to life is to continue to work through our complexes and find ways to face issues by coming up with new ideas and new experiences. Let me just say that the interest of a crisis coming unbidden, one of the things that reminds us is we're not in control. And we can subtly begin to think we are in control, and that, you know, we've got the tiger by the tail, and we can manage our life and whatever's going on. But when a crisis comes, it just turns everything upside down. And we realize it's hard to find suitable answers for this. And we've had one crisis after another. You've just mentioned some of them, and we're getting ready to face another one, I would say, at the election and after the election. And so that's why it's so unnerving, is it's not just a problem. It intersects our psyche, our soul, our relationships, our great republic. This country, we're still trying to figure out how to make it work. And it forces us to think about some things that we might not otherwise think about. And in that sense, the course is never waste a good crisis. How do we not waste this terrible thing that afflicts us at so many areas? And that's when the nature of my course, and I'll have some things to say about that.
So in the reality that you just laid out, crisis to chaos, in the chaos theory, it says very clearly that it is a moment, an inflection time for us to rise to the occasion and to dive deeply into the angels of our better nature, and not let the other side of us take over and dwell in this darkness. But how do we get to that lightness? How do we get to light to be able to have the wherewithal?
Yeah, and yes. Well, I want to get there a little more indirectly, but here's the deal. Mark Twain said the only thing that never changes is the part of us that is surprised by change. See, life is full of change. Life is changing. I mean, we're getting older. Life just moves on. Time just passes through us, or we pass through it. So that change is part of life, but we can get very seduced into thinking that we know what's going on, and we like to hang on to the stable, and we get ready for some chaos. We get ready for some normal change, the kids leaving for school, changing a job. But all of a sudden, when a crisis or chaos hits, it changes too much, too quickly. And therefore it throws us off, and it threatens everything about. It's like, all right, okay, I can handle some, but I can't handle this much, this quick. So the first rule is, how do you deal with change? And for most of us, not very well. You know, we're just not programmed for change, and because we're into survival mode. And it's interesting. One of Jung's great quotes is that people need difficulties for health. And that always sort of throws you off. What do you mean we need difficulties for health? Because difficulties throw us out of a more superficial way of living. And as you said, they move us into a deeper way of living. And they almost force us to change. They force us to come to terms that will bring our essential humanity, spirituality, more golden nature ahead of itself, bring it up, because normally we won't do that. It's interesting. I teach a cultural psychology course out at U of H on Saturdays, actually. And they said in 2013, and I'm not, Black Lives Matters, I'm not sure when that started, but that seems too early for when that started. But that 19% of the white adults in America believe Black Lives Matter. In an August survey, 55% of white Americans believe Black Lives Matter. Well, you and I both know, we've known that for years. I heard Dr. King speak when I was in college, and he's awakened me and enlightened me to stop being so narrow in my thinking, but deal with some of the injustices that were going on in the world. And I chose to go that route as opposed to just go sell insurance and make money. I said, I wonder if I could make a difference, not knowing who or how or where it would all unfold. But the point is another quote by Jung. He said, the apparently unendurable problem is proof you're on the right path. When it appears you can't get through it, when it appears it's too much, you're on the right path because it's forcing you to come to terms with things maybe you didn't come to terms with. In other words, with the George Floyd thing and so many other, Breonna and so many other people, that the injustice that we've all seen on TV, we watch it. Those kind of crises has forced people to begin to look at their values and to look at their instinctual world of what fairness and justice is. So my point is, rather than see the crisis, which is unnerving, as a threat, which it is at one level, but it may be forcing us to grow and deal with life at a level that we haven't evolved into. Yes.
Do we have a choice going forward? James Baldwin said this: not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced.
I love James Baldwin.
And we have for so long wanted not to face the history of this country, the ills of this, the sins of this country going back to slavery. And everything that is manifesting itself today goes back to slavery.
Yeah, bro.
We've never had our race and reconciliation moment like South Africa had, to finally admit their history, admit their truth, admit what happened, so that you can move forward. We keep wanting to live in denial almost about the reality of the social inequities, social inequalities that are existing today, that has a historical root and foundation that has led us through this whole horrible period of slavery, to the Civil War, to Reconstruction, to Jim Crow, to now in the death of George Floyd, coming into reality to roost among us once again.
Absolutely. And I because I'm home alone, you know, and teaching out of my study. And I was in a relationship that ended. And as an extrovert, to suddenly be in solitude and alone more has been unnerving, but having the courage to stay with it, and the prayer and support of just staying with the uncomfortableness, I find more comfort in my own solitude because I'm discovering aspects of myself. But one of the things that I've kind of gotten hooked on is C-SPAN 3, which is the American History Channel. And they have had incredible programs all through the summer talking about the history of America. And I love history because it's about human nature. And one of the things, and of course, the whole Black history, as you know, is just American history. It's a piece of American history that people choose not to deal with. But the same people who won't accept white people that won't accept people of color, there's plenty of other things in their life they won't accept, but they don't deal with those. They project it out onto someone else. So when we are projecting negatively on other people, it's because of aspects in our life we won't accept and come to terms with. You know, it's like pointing the finger to the speck in someone's eye while we have three fingers pointing back to the log in our own that Jesus talked about. You know, that I have to do my inner work and stop projecting on other people. And I've been out at University of Houston for 23 years, and I'm so lucky because the whole world is out there. And I've done Ramadan prayer meetings and met the Hare Krishna people. I've had meals with them and been to Seder's and stuff. And I go because I want to listen and learn and get to know people's tradition and who they are. And I come to find out that we're all exactly the same. And of course, that's what Huckleberry Finn was all about, is we're all exactly the same. And perhaps it's the crisis that forces us to see that. But yeah, the whole Black history thing, you know, everybody's from Africa. We're all African. Everybody's from Africa. And those that moved up, 150,000, whatever, 300,000, that moved up into the Scandinavian area, because there wasn't as much sun, their skin went from dark to light.
You said something earlier.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off about with time. You said something earlier that's very important. We must do our own work. We must be willing to do our own work. And part of doing our own work is to be honest with ourselves. And I think lots of times I see, particularly in this year of 2020, that a lot of folk are lying to themselves. We lie to ourselves so we can avoid the pain. We lie to ourselves so we don't have to do our work. We will not have the discussion ourselves to ourselves as we are. We want to project a different person than who we are, so we never have that honest conversation. And I think part of that is due to, if I continue to be in my ignorance or act that I am in ignorance, or act out of ignorance that I think I am in, I never have to take responsibility and ownership and own up to anything. Once I say I know or understand, then I'm faced with a dilemma. I can't live in my innocence anymore, and I have to make a decision to get involved, to get in the world, to challenge the issues that I see, that my blinders are now taken off, that I finally do see. And so I think we remain ignorant because ignorant is no commitment, no accountability. I don't have to do anything because I don't see it, I don't know it, I don't understand it. Once I see it, I'm lost. But that's what we're called to do, because in the end, we all know that an unexamined life is not worth living.
Well, and Jung, the word he called that was individuation. And that's breaking from the power of the tribe and the approval of the collective we're in. And what happens is, if you decide to become an individual and follow your values and your passion and your ideas, you're going to threaten your family. You may threaten your peers. You may threaten the people you make money from. And so what we end up doing is we end up repressing and denying what we really feel, because we want money and success, and we want security. And so here's what happens. If I'm in a group of people who could be a church group or a social group that believe a certain ethic, and I read a book or have an experience that gives me an aha moment, and I come back to the group to share it with, and they're not ready to grow or learn or listen, then my choice, they'll kick me out or I'll have to leave. And so there's sort of a collective pressure that people say, well, my friends are racist, and so I'm going to continue to be that way because I want their friendship. And so people don't find the moral courage, as Jung called it, to individuate and to follow their own path. George MacDonald, who was C.S. Lewis's mentor, dead, of course, but he said, the hope for the world is enough if enough individuals dare to follow their sacred path. Individuals follow it. And we've seen a lot of people step up through history and really through the last several months who step up to declare their reality and get away from things that are unhealthy and to go march because that's what they believe, when in fact family and groups might toss them out. And that's what I like to see, the individual following the inner path. You don't become an authentic person without paying a price.
You don't mean the price of discipleship, do you?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to follow your own conviction in the group think, which is so powerful. It's true everywhere, but the cost of discipleship is to what's his name? Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss, which is another way of saying be who you are, because he said a path will open up for you that won't open up for anybody else. And you'll find a way made for you and your passion, your interest, your calling that the world is waiting for. And one of my incredible joys is meeting these students at the University of Houston who are so far ahead of what people think they are, who they get it. They want a meaningful life and not just a personal peace and affluence. They want to make a difference. They want to stop the racism in all of its forms. Can't we all just get along, as what's his name said on the streets of Los Angeles? Can't we all find a way to celebrate our uniqueness? But if somebody doesn't know and they celebrate their uniqueness, their choice is to fit into the crowd, and they stay with the crowd and get support from the crowd. And so we never get their true gift to the world because they're not following their own path. And people are threatened by that. Well, I guess they killed Jesus because of that, because he went the way of what he thought was best for the people who were suffering, and it cost him his life.
So herd mentality, I heard, not herd mentality, but herd mentality. I've heard that phrase a lot lately of people just getting into this sense of fury around just buying into and accepting stuff without examining anything. I don't think we want to be told anymore. We just want to be told what to do and how to think and not do our own thinking ourselves.
Yeah, that's what immaturity is I want all the privileges, but I don't want the responsibilities. That's an adolescence. Adulthood is you get all the freedom and the privileges, but with it, you embrace the responsibilities of life. And that's what being a citizen in this country or any country is all about. And I tell my students, I said, I don't care who you vote for, but if you don't go vote, then your opinion's worth nothing. And I don't care how awkward it is, go do something. Just go do something to show that you're participating, and the whole world will support that. And the energies of the mystery will support that if you just follow your calling and your interests.
I feel it in my bones that we're about to run out of time here. So let me just give you a quick 30 seconds or so. Give me a quick wrap up, hopeful something that we can get through these next 78 days.
Well, don't be afraid to get personal and do some things to change your own lives, to drop some old habits, embrace some new habits, find some creativity. Maybe you have time in the pandemic to read a book or listen to a lecture that you've never heard. And there's so much good stuff, but to take the time and trouble to feed your own soul. I went and bought some flowers and planted out front so my neighbors walking by would have beautiful flowers, and I would have. And so many of them said, thank you for doing that. I said, well, why not put a little beauty in the world? We can all do something to make the world a better place. And it's just a creative individual effort. And my whole point is don't waste the crisis. There's so much opportunity in this.
How do we get to the point of, I love the idea of the flowers and planting it and for your neighbors so everybody can share it, they can see it, it builds community, it's about who my neighbor is. But how do we get to this thing in Zoom world to really begin to realize that we use Zoom for business, we use Zoom for meetings, we need to use Zoom in our personal life because that's all we have. And the ability to reach out to people and have, just to touch them, to say, I'm thinking about you, I love you, I care about you, I know you must be going through stuff because I'm going through stuff, we're all going through stuff in being in. We need to take the opportunities to do that more, do we not?
When people come to your mind, do you think it comes from the plumber or the carpenter? It comes from your soul, from God. Did you think about somebody? Maybe you're meant to call them to check in on them. You know how good you feel when somebody calls to check in on you, just thinking about you. How are you doing? Well, my goodness, it means so much to people who are locked in or people who are marginalized, to reach out to people and can see it from their point of view and to reach out and find a way. Listen, snail mail is so good this time of year. To send a card with a stamp on it saying, I just appreciate you being in my life. I tell my college students, if you send a snail mail to your parents about thanking them for supporting you in school, they would fall over, because the biggest thing they want is gratitude. And it's often, I know you feel it, but you don't communicate it. And as we get in past the election, I think the crisis that will continue, you know, there are people all over the country who are fighting to keep the good going and to keep the structures of our culture functioning, and praying for them and supporting them and being aware of them is so important. I can do my part where I am, but there are other people doing their part where they are. And I have to trust them. I have to trust them.
Yep, we have to trust. It's all about trust. Nothing happens without trust. All right, Dr. Herb, we're out of time. We have to run now. Thank you for being part of this. We could go on for a long time. I know you and I are good at this. But I appreciate you being our guest, being on Dialogue Houston. And we'll see you on the other side, probably in 2021, when we get a new world, perhaps. We'll see what happens.
Let's hope.
Let me do a few closing thoughts here. We hope to get to do a great reset pretty soon, a great reset. The battle is for the soul of America. That's Dr. Martin Luther King's quote, by the way. The battle is for the soul of America. So what happens in a few short days and what will happen after that depends a lot on us. We will be called more and more in the 78 days between now and then and in 2021 to know what your purpose is, to know what your calling is, and to know your mission. And we need to live those callings, those purpose and missions. Stand up, show up, stand up, speak up, and follow up. We really need to do those simple things. Show up, stand up, speak up, and follow up, and be engaged. Don't be a bystander. Don't be on the sidelines. The issues are too great and too important. So let me just wrap up with this thought, and so we get out of here on time. So whatever happens, November 3rd, it's about November 4th through those 78 days to January 20th and then into 2021. The civic and cultural spheres must articulate a new moral and ethical vision. We need a new narrative of what hope looks like, a hope that unifies us, a hope that brings a diverse nation and people together. At the local level, it is necessary to begin to do our work in relationship building of mutual trust and respect, because nothing happens without trust. Nothing happens without trust. So we know what's ahead of us. We know what we have to do. We look forward to all of us being part of this. We look forward to you joining us on future segments of Dialogue Houston. And so as we go forward, as always, be well, stay safe, and until we come to you again, peace, power, and love.